Welcome, friends. I welcome all of you again in this new episode of Crit Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni. Uh, the aim of this series is to bring forth different issues in the field of literary criticism and theory. And of course, in the previous episodes, we have tried to bring in some those issues which are generally not taken up uh, by the students and teachers of literary criticism. So we are actually providing sort of links that would help you to connect different dots or points in this vast domain of literary criticism. In today's session, we are going to focus on a very important topic, and that is modernism. I welcome you, sir, in this episode. To begin with, sir, again, let us begin with the concepts. There are words which keep on confusing people. So there are three words: modern, modernism, and modernity. So, what these three terms actually mean, and does modernity only refer to literature, or does it refer to overall condition of that particular time?
Thanks, Dr. Pranav Ratnaparthi and Professor Ghanesham Borathi. And very good morning to all viewers. This is a very pertinent and very confusing also question related to modernism. We shall start with a very basic understanding about these three terms. Modernity is a condition. Modernism is a process. And modern is a tendency. So when you use the word modernity, you are talking about actually the condition, meaning the situation, and it is not chronologically limited. For example, we can say that Shakespeare was modern in the sense that he had all those things of which the modernist period was characterized by. For example, he always looked forward, he was way ahead of his time, and all those things. When you use the word modernization, you mean to say that it is a process of socialization. It is a process through which the modernist ideas are likely to be circulated. That is, you look for the modernist ideas. I'm using the word modernist, which is time-based, which is chronologically limited. For example, modernism seems to have started somewhere in the beginning of, towards the end of 19th century and the beginning of 20th century, across all fields. So the period that is limited to towards the end of 19th century and the beginning of 20th century may be safely called to be the period of modernism. But modernity is a condition, and you can see that all those artists, writers, critics, thinkers, scientists, for example, Galileo was also modern. Copernicus was also modern. And the reasons are obvious, because they were challenging, they were raising doubts, they were resisting the established orders. So in that sense, they were modern. And I think even if we live in the period of modernism or even postmodernism, we are not modern in the sense in which those modern writers and artists and thinkers and scientists were. So it's a very, very hazy kind of, very unclear kind of term, and we have to be very cautious and careful using these three terms: modern and modernity and modernism. So modernity is a condition, modernism is a process, modern is a tendency. And while we are using these terms, we have to be careful because they have semantic fluctuations, that their meanings keep on changing, and we have to understand the subtle differences that they have. Modernization is more related to sociology and psychology and politics and culture. Modernization is more related to humanities and also to natural sciences, of course. So modernism is modernization. We can use that word. For example, you have urbanization and all other
A process mode.
terms that we use. Yeah, processes that we often refer to. So modernism stands for all that.
Right.
Now, the issue of modernism, the next point perhaps that we can take up about modernism is that modernism was characterized by the spirit of resistance. If you ask me, one single important issue that characterized modernism was the spirit of opposition. And this spirit of opposition was not limited to a particular field. It was across all fields. In poetry, in painting, in different kinds of arts, in natural sciences, in social sciences, in humanities, everywhere in philosophy, you shall see. There was the spirit of opposition. There was an opposition to the tradition. Tradition was likely to be challenged. All modernist writers, critics, thinkers, and scientists challenged the given ideas, the given set of values. So values were challenged, ideas were questioned, and all these writers, thinkers were looking for alternative ways of defining human life. This was towards the end of 19th century. In the beginning of 20th century, you have a different perspective of modernism. I'll come to that later. But to begin with, towards the end of 19th century, three important thinkers perhaps propelled the journey of modernism, that they were responsible more or less in the emergence of modernism. One was, of course, Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, who for the first time raised serious challenges towards the conventions in religion, conventions in philosophy, conventions in the thinking process. He was the first troublemaker in the established sense of the term in European domain of thinking. With Nietzsche, we move over to the next one, and that was, of course, Karl Marx. Marx was responsible for making people think in different ways. We know how he carried out the economical interpretation of history for the first time. He introduced different ideas, and we all know the Marxist metaphor of base and superstructure, all other things which were important in his thinking, you know. So Marx was also a very crucial figure, a very important figure in introducing modernist ideas to Europe and by extension to the people across the world. The third important figure was, of course, Sigmund Freud. Freud was responsible because Freud brought in very different ideas in the conception of mind. We know in the Aristotelian period, mind was differently understood. In the medieval period, mind was differently understood. And with Freud coming on the scene, perhaps for the first time in the entire history of Europe and the world, that mind was understood as a pathologically as a pathological thing. That mind could be examined in pathology as much as we can examine all other things. That is why we had something called clinical psychology, and then everything was being experimented. That is what I think the important ideas that these three philosophers provided. They were thinkers and philosophers. And towards the beginning of the 20th century, there were two world wars, you know, and they were very much responsible for these two world wars were very much responsible for the different conception of modernism.
Right.
Of course, the spirit of resistance was maintained. The writers and thinkers and painters and scientists went on challenging social and political norms.
Right.
This, I think, is what we have to understand in case of modernism as a force. Two other things which I would like to talk about, and then we shall move to the next point. One is that modernism was characterized by the new discoveries in science. So science literally dislodged, science literally replaced religion, replaced culture. So by science we mean experiments, by science we mean empiricism, by science we mean positivism, by science we mean search for evidence, by science we mean examination of the world in which we live. Rationality was there. So all these ideas pervaded across different fields of human knowledge. Naturally, scientific temperament was developed in all fields, not just limited to science, natural sciences, towards social sciences and humanities also. You shall see that science had a very heavy influence over the very thinking of the critics and thinkers and writers across different disciplines.
Right.
The other thing was that religion lost its stronghold. Culture was in its very critical period because culture did not maintain its hegemony, which it had earlier, and that everyone was looking for a different kind of social order. So these were, I think, the important
Right.
ideas, important influences that took modernism away from its original idea of enlightenment. Enlightenment as a movement in philosophy provided the necessary backdrop, the necessary background to modernism. But enlightenment was also being challenged later on, especially in high modernism. In the 20th century, enlightenment came to be severely criticized. The reason perhaps was what I was earlier talking about, the two world wars, the Holocaust, and the increasing scientific temperament were some of the reasons why there was a different conception of modernism.
So, sir, in that sense, then how the resistance came in the field of criticism? Or this experimentation also? Both.
Yeah. If we have to bring it to criticism, that is a very relevant question and relevant to our topic as well. That resistance, the spirit of resistance in criticism can be seen in the beginning of 20th century. Because towards the end of 19th century, we had Matthew Arnold and Walter Pater. That was the Victorian period, to take two important names, of course, names of critics. But they were traditional, conventional in every sense of the term, Arnold more so, Pater to a relatively less extent. But the spirit of resistance in literary criticism came in the beginning of the 20th century. And the critics who were responsible for the spirit of inquiry, I would rather say the spirit of inquiry in place of resistance, because resistance came gradually, of course, it percolated. But critics started inquiring into the very notions of the very ideas of criticism. Now we can understand this only when we understand what kind of literary criticism was present before modernist ideas came into literary criticism. You shall see earlier, that is towards the end of 19th century, literary criticism was humanistic, literary criticism was moralistic, it was social, and it was cultural also. And it was not intellectual in the established sense of the term. So that intellectual rigor, that intellectual discipline, the elements of objectivity and rationality were absent. So the modernist critics started raising doubts about the usefulness of the established 19th century literary ideas. The ideas about literature, the ideas about readers, the ideas about appreciation, the ideas about knowing literature, and all those things that we can group under literary studies. So the spirit of resistance or spirit of inquiry started with the conception of literature. What do we call literature to be? And this has been a question not just limited to or confined to the discussion of the modernist writers, or critics. This has been the case right from the Greeks. It has come down to the definition of literature, and that most of us, we have not been able to arrive at a very conclusive statement about the nature of literature.
Right.
Also, but then modernist writers and critics were trying to do that. Interestingly, modernist criticism was not just related to the critics alone. It was inclusive in the sense that writers and poets were also critics. The tradition that we had, especially in English criticism, we have Philip Sidney and Dr. Samuel Johnson and John Dryden before him, followed by other writers like other critics like Wordsworth and Shelley and Keats, and the same tradition, Arnold also, the same tradition you shall see being carried forward in the 20th century, in the modernist period as well. So you cannot very successfully and comfortably distinguish between literature and criticism, even in the 20th century, the beginning of 20th century, because Eliot himself was a poet and a critic of the first order. So we have the spirit of inquiry, the spirit of resistance, both in the nature of literature and in the nature of criticism as well.
Yeah.
So Eliot raised some doubts about the conception of literature, not directly, but when he raised doubts about poetry, the conception of poetry, we all know, and he was looking for unification of sensibility in place of dissociation of sensibility, the terms that he popularized. The other term that he was looking for was objective correlative, which he introduced when he interpreted Shakespeare's Hamlet. We all know this. By doing this, probably Eliot was raising doubts about or resisting to the conventional idea of literature. So as far as literature is concerned and the nature of literature is concerned, we can turn towards Eliot and we can understand how the modernist critics were raising doubts against the established ideas about literature. When we come towards the consideration of reader, we should turn towards Richards, I. Richards,
Yeah.
because Richards was responsible for he was the first critic in the modern sense of the term who tried to understand literature in relation to readers, how readers can be brought into the circulation of literary ideas, because he was trying to develop a communicative model of literature where he thought readers have an important role to play. So as far as the resistance to the earlier ideas about literature and reader was concerned, Richards could be said to have defied, to have resisted the conventional exclusive idea of literature. Exclusive in the sense that conventional idea of literature excluded readers. Readers were not included into the consideration of literature. Richards did that to some extent. And we can turn towards Lewis for introducing the ideas which were lost earlier, because you can look upon Lewis as the successor of Matthew Arnold. As far as these three
Tradition
are
is concerned.
Yeah, as far as tradition is concerned. If really Eliot was raising questions towards the convention of literature, Lewis was also doing that to an extent, but Lewis wanted to continue with the high culture that was proposed by Matthew Arnold. So keeping Lewis for some time aside, we can look upon I. Richards and T.S. Eliot to be the troublemakers. They were mostly responsible for introducing a new conception, a modernist conception of literature. And it is in that we can see the spirit of resistance, I think.
Why this activity of criticism became more complicated or complex in modern times?
Intellectual.
Yeah, intellectual.
Yeah. There are reasons for that, of course. Your observation is good. But the reasons are that, as I said, it was because of the scientific temperament, because of the predominance of reason, because of the significance of rationality, because of the logicality that the critics were looking for, the order and the objectivity. This is one reason. The other reason is that the preceding period of Victorian criticism was not that rational, was not that logical. That is what the modernist critics always felt. The reason why Eliot did not like the Victorian poetry, and the reason why Eliot did not like even the romantic poetry, and that he liked the metaphysical poetry, we all know, is symptomatic of this fact that these critics and writers were looking for the intellectuality. And the other very important reason why literary criticism in the 20th century became increasingly intellectual and logical perhaps is that they wanted to virtually wipe out the element of emotions and feelings from literature. they did not want literature to be emotional and sentimental and expressive. One reason was that there were excesses of the influence of romanticism, and Eliot and all his followers and his and the critics who had some resemblance with his thinking did not approve of the sentimentality in literature. They did not believe that literature is simply an art. They believed that literature is a craft. So another reason perhaps was this, that they were Aristotelian in their thinking. When you turn towards new criticism, you understand that they were new Aristotelians in a way, because they were looking for objectivity, for reason, for rationality, for logic, for order, for objectivity. And Eliot and other critics found that not only Victorian poetry, Victorian literature, even romantic literature was also running short of these things. That is why they launched serious attacks against them. Why Eliot took heavily over Wordsworth was this reason, because according to him, Wordsworth was responsible for introducing this element of emotiveness in literature, which Eliot did not approve of, because there was excess of feelings and absence of thought. So thought was to be brought into literature, and if thought was to be brought into literature, then emotion was to be wiped out. It was to be eliminated. That is what they did that.
Yes.
Another very important reason is that these writers and critics were living in the Europe which was unstable, which was torn apart by the First World War, especially the First World War. So the First World War was one of the important reasons why emotions, sympathies and empathies and feelings did not get any place into the conception of literature.
Correct.
Because that there were serious losses. The very idea of human being was being challenged. This is deeper than it appears.
So that was the wasteland, actually.
Idea. Yeah, that was the wasteland. The reason why he made it intellectual. Because once you turn towards emotions, you turn towards humanity, the kindness, the sympathy that you show to others and you show to yourself. But then that was literally absent, and that was absent because of the First World War. So the First World War took heavy toll on the minds of the writers, critics and artists. Naturally, there was increasing orientation towards intellectualization of all these things.
Yes.
Okay. That we have to understand.
Fine.
That is the reason why it became intellectual and experimental also, because they did not have any other way to do away with the tradition.
Traditions.
The one way to do away with the tradition was to experiment with tradition.
Right.
However, Eliot had a different idea of tradition, because Eliot always believed that experiments are possible by being within tradition.
Yeah.
He expanded the idea of tradition, and included experiments into tradition itself. But other critics did not approve all this. They seriously challenged the tradition and wanted to bring different discourses into literature. That is why it became increasingly experimental.
Yes, sir. So I think we have taken a kind of survey of modernism. Of course, we can continue with this, but then at some point of time, we have to stop. Sir, before we end this session, again, I would like to ask you one question. That, of course, there are books to read about modernism. For example, there is a Routledge's Critical Idiom series where the entire book is dedicated to the discussion of modernism. But what other books you would suggest for, let us say, for beginners or for those people who wish to learn something more about modernism in a very simple way, not getting into the complexities at the beginning level?
Yeah. There is one very useful book for students and teachers and researchers. I would suggest only one book.
Yeah.
Malcolm Bradbury wrote a book on modernism.
Malcolm Bradbury. Okay.
And it is a bulky one, though it is relatively difficult to understand, but then he covers all aspects of modernism.
Right.
So even for students also, especially PG students, for UG students this would be heavy, but for PG students and for the researchers doing a field and PhD, and even teachers and scholars, they can read this wonderful book. There are so many other books, of course, which you earlier pointed out.
Yeah.
There have been series devoted by Oxford and Cambridge and Macmillan, and many writers have done that. Yeah. But if you want to understand one side of modernism, I think one very useful book is by Peter Widdowson, by the title Literature, which covers most of the ideas that we are discussing right now.
Correct.
Though he is decidedly a Marxist in his orientation, but still I think it is very useful to understand, because he provides very useful information about how literature was differently interpreted, how literature was differently conceived, and consequently how criticism was also differently conceived.
Yes, thank you.
There is one more book by Chris Baldick on the history of literary criticism. Chris Baldick. This is again a very wonderful book that you have, and he covers most of the modernist writers as well, modernist critics. Fantastic. Also, he goes into explaining the different aspects related to modernism.
Right, sir?
I think there are so many books. This much is enough.
Yeah. Yes, Shyam.
Baldick is the same guy who wrote Dictionary of Literature of Serbian, right? It's the same one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think we can go on like this, but probably, friends, all the readers and the viewers, now we have come from traditional criticism to modernism, and obviously the modernism has paved the way for new theories like new criticism and subsequent domains of literary theory. So in the coming episodes, we will definitely try to explore those areas. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us, for guiding us. And all the dear viewers, keep watching this channel, Crit Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni, and keep subscribing this. Thank you very much for your support and your cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.